Shalom, family. Um, so I have to start at the beginning, so I'm going to start with the tunnel of light. I remember being with the Father before I came here. I don't remember what shape or form I was. All I know is that we were having a conversation and we were on the side of a mountain or in a green, luscious place, and we were talking and he asked me if I was sure, and I said yes. He asked me again, are you sure? I said yes. He asked me again and I said yes. And in that instant I entered into a tunnel of light, and it was like a slide. And inside this slide, I was inside. I don't know what shape or form I was, but I know at the opening of the end of the light, or where the light of the tunnel was coming from, was the face of the Most High that I was just speaking with. So I could see the face and it was smiling at me. And I was in this tunnel of light, and I, could feel myself getting further and further and further and further and further away. And when I got further, the further away I got from that presence, the more horrified and frightened I became. And I screamed, no! No, I don't want to go. I changed my mind. I want to go back. And in the instant that I changed my mind, when I saw that the light was closing, the gap was closing, and I was going to be separated, I changed my mind and I started to try to climb back up the inside of this tunnel of light. And inside the tunnel of light, the sides were like, when you first came in, it was like ridges. And then the further down you got, it became more like a slide. So I was still at the, point where I was trying to go back, and those ridges just slip, and just was slick, and then they were gone, and then I was gone. And I believe that to be the moment that of conception for, that happened between my parents. And that's the only explanation I can give for the Most High bringing me into this existence and me being aware of it. He brought that to me many, many, many years ago. But I didn't remember that right away. But once he gave it to me again, and then just recently, over the last few days, things have been coming up that have been tucked away, buried, hidden, whatever you want to say, covered up. But so a lot of people, probably for me, that's not a story I can share a lot. But it does say that he knew us before we were in the womb, so that's my recollection of that. So blood and demons, the other two parts. The doorway for the demons was opened during my teen years, when I was dabbling in astrology and tarot card reading, and really into it, in the sense of, between me and my friends, we just wanted to know, our horoscopes. We're Gemini, what sign are you, etc., etc. Brownie, excuse me. Brown. That's my dog opening the patio door on her own because she heard something outside. I'm sorry. But anyways, I didn't realize what I was doing. I didn't think it was bad or wrong or anything. I mean, I knew to a certain extent, because I was a child. I thought that, oh, I just want to, learn how to do this. It's a game. Play this game. But in actuality, the sense that it was a game, I really became into it and was really good at discerning things about people, and then just using those cards as a tool to kind of, give a false insight as to what was going on with them in their life, or, how to change it or whatever. And I felt like, because I had been baptized and I was a child of God, that it was okay for me to just go ahead and, just play this game. But that was foolish thinking, obviously. But he dragged me out of it. And that's one thing. The Father always has his hand on me from from before I was born. He gave me a reason, or he asked me if I wanted to be here. I said yes 3 times, and so I came. The path to get to understanding why I'm here has been a path. But so back to the astrology and that stuff, that opened up the doorways. It really did, for allowing visitation from whatever deities and spirit forms, and that took me into another realm of suffering from sleep paralysis and demonic attacks in my sleep. Or actually, I would be awake, but I wouldn't be able to move. My body wasn't able to move. I was paralyzed, essentially, but I would be screaming in terror and trying to wake myself up, trying to escape the grasp and the clutch of the forces that were, paralyzing me. And the only thing that stopped it at that time is when I called on the name of Jesus. And so I still lived in fear of, not really wanting to go to sleep, or not being able to get the connection between these aliens and demon forces that were visiting me, if they were going to be there, or if they were going to, do something. I had one instance where I was asleep and I had a visitation, and I was taken into some type of room. I can just remember a room, I'll say that much. And I had these entities surrounding me, looking down at me. They weren't saying anything. They were completely telepathic. And come completely telepathic, because I was in the paralyzed state and I'm screaming at the top of my lungs, and it was to no effect. But anyways, needless to say, during this one encounter, I woke up, and I had a square patch of my skin had been removed from my buttocks area. And so when I got up, and I knew that it was happening when it happened, when they were taking the skin, because I could feel it and it hurt. But they cut the skin in a square shape, this demon, and pulled the skin off, took it. And so once I came out of the paralyzed state, and I was back, in my bedroom, and I was probably at this time about 15 years old. I got up, I ran into my bathroom, and I turned around and I pulled down, my clothing, and I looked in the mirror, and I saw that there was a square patch of my skin had been removed. I mean, it was a perfectly cut square. And so I ran to my mother's bedroom, and I busted into her room, and I woke her up out of a dead sleep, and I'm like, Mom, I was like, look at this. I was like, and I at that time called them aliens, came and took a patch of my skin. And my mom wakes up and she looks at me and she's like, no, you must have just scratched yourself, because there was blood. You must have just scratched yourself. No, Mom, no, that's not what happened. I was having I was paralyzed in my sleep again, and these things came and they took my, piece of my skin. And my mom was like, no, you must have, you must have the heater up too high on your waterbed, because I had a waterbed. And that must have, you burned your skin off or something. No, Mom, the sheets are intact on my bed. Go look, come see. No, go back to bed. You were dreaming. You scratched yourself. So I go back in my room and, horrified, sit on my bed. And I don't know what I did. I probably cried and just sat there, afraid. So that's one instance, but shortly after that, we moved from that place. Oh, I also, I live in a state, Oklahoma, where there's a lot of sightings of aircraft, strange-looking aircraft and stuff. So it's a phenomenon around here. I don't know. That doesn't really have any. I mean, it kind of does, and then it kind of doesn't. But I'm gonna go back to the fact that those forces, I now have come to learn what those forces are, and they were, on some, spiritual realm. It was a spiritual attack from demonic forces, and I'm not going to call. I at one point in my life I called it aliens, but I'm not going to call it that anymore, because it's just interdimensional characters that are out there, and I've been approached by them many times, tortured for many years of my life. From 15 years old to probably about 18, 20, somewhere in there. We moved. They followed me. And at the new house where we lived, there was many, old trees in our backyard. And I would see them up in the trees translucently, just all there, And of course I would tell my mom about all of this. because I always told everything, tell my mom about this, and she thought I was crazy. Literally thought I was absolutely out of my mind, having, some kind of schizophrenic hallucinations, just out of my mind. And I wasn't. I was seeing what I was seeing and perceiving things that, other people could not perceive or see. And, it was scary. And so I just didn't talk about it with anyone except to the Most High. And I gave it up to him, and I asked for his protection and asked him to, please just cover me in the blood so that I could be, safe and, not be terrorized by these things. And he did. Of course, during the time when it was happening, I was praying too, but I was also unrepentant in the fact that I had been involved in, playing with tarot cards and, doing all of these things that opened up the doorways for that stuff to be going on. Raised on television like most, children in my generation. I was born in the 70s, 1971. So, but with my mother being a nurse, she introduced me to pills, through doctors and things, just pills, you're crazy, first of all, So I spent many years using a lot of drugs that were prescribed medications, and I was a pill popper, but it was all related to pain issues that I had. My mind was not completely right because I was in a lot of pain. That pain, as women, sisters, you can understand this. As women, we know what a monthly period menstrual cramps feels like. Well, you can take that and multiply it by 1,000, and also the amount of blood that is lost due to a low RH factor, low blood clotting factor, just, copious amounts of blood. And some, all, when I was younger, hallelujah, it was, when I first started, I started at 11. And that was hard enough in itself. But lucky for me, the first instance was with my mom was right there in the bathroom with me. And I was using the restroom, and she was in the mirror primping or putting on makeup or whatever, getting ready. We were getting ready to go somewhere. But I, had a little spot in my underpants, and I told my mom, I was like, Mom, what is this? She looked at me and she was like, oh my goodness, She's like, well, it looks like you might be trying to start your period. And I said, oh, okay. I had read like books, Judy Blume book, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. And then younger girls or people in my generation would appreciate that, those books. But anyways, so I had kind of an idea, and I was really actually excited about it and proud of that fact, and my mom had to go, to the store, and she brought me pads and everything, and that was really funny because my brother, I was proud when my mom got back from the store and she handed them to him. She said, um, she explained to me how to use them, and she gave it to me, and she said, okay, go put these up, and I was like, okay. So I went upstairs and I was going to put them in the hall closet, or actually I was going to take them and show my sister. But anyways, my brother ran into me in the hallway, and my mom had also given me this pamphlet to call. There was the hospital pamphlet, and the pamphlet had on it, all information about health issues and stuff, and she had circled the one that talked about the women's issues. And she wanted me to call that hotline later and listen to that. So, anyways, my brother bumps into me in the hallway, and he looks at me and he's like, what are you doing? And he sees me carrying this big old bag of pads. And I said, I'm going, these are mine. I started my period, And he was like, oh my goodness. He started just laughing, I mean, he laughed hysterically. My brother's 3 years older than me. So he was, just being a kid. But that kind of, I still didn't understand why he was laughing at me. He thought it was funny. But I kind of do. But it hurt my feelings then. But anyways, that was the beginning of the first few years. It was like clockwork every month. I could count 28 days on the calendar, mark it, know when I would start. It was completely normal. I had like a 5 to 6 day cycle or whatever. When I was 13, I was in class one day, and I started bleeding in class, and I had on a pair of Levi's 501s. I'll never forget those jeans. But I raised my hand, I asked the coach, Jedlicka, male teacher. I was in history class. I believe it was Oklahoma history class. And I asked him, I said, Coach, can I go to the restroom? He says, no, you should have went in between classes, no. And so I sat there, and I was feeling, really self-conscious all through class. But about halfway through class, I looked down, and my jeans were completely soaked in blood. And it was coming down to, where you could see it towards the thigh. I mean, it looked, my chair had blood in the chair. And so I'm sitting there, I'm 13 years old, and I am bleeding through my clothes all over this chair in the middle of the classroom. I knew I had started, but that was a lot of blood. Never had been like that before. And so the end of class comes, the bell rings, and everybody's getting up to leave. and change classes. And I'm sitting there because I'm paralyzed. I'm traumatized. I cannot move. And my friend Lori, one of my best friends, was right there. And she said, Michelle, what's wrong? Because I'm still under the desk. Only I know this has happened. So I just kind of backed my chair up, and I let Lori look down, and I showed her what was going on here. And she was like, oh my God, oh my God. Coach is like, what are you ladies doing? Let's get to moving, And she's like, Coach, Michelle's bleeding, And he comes over to me, and I stand up, and there's literally, it was just completely all the way down my jeans, all over the chair. And it was bad. It was really bad. And so the coach freaked out. He was like, oh my God, oh my God, imagine, this grown man seeing a 13-year-old girl standing in front of him, her jeans completely soaked in blood from the waist down, and the chair covered in blood. It had to be horrific, and it was. But he took off his sports coat, and he wrapped it around me, and he picked me up. He carried me down to the office, and they called my mom, took me to the nurse's office. They called my mom. They, wrapped me up with a blanket and everything, and my mom came and picked me up. But she asked me, she said, did you know you were going to start? And I said, I'm not supposed to start right now. And so she says, okay. And I told her, I start crying because I told her, I said, Mom, I asked Coach Jedlick if I could go to the bathroom. He wouldn't let me go. I said, I could have got to the bathroom before, I could have, rolled up paper towels or something, but he wouldn't let me go. And this happened, in front of everybody, And that was hard. But that was the beginning. And I had many, many times, let's just say from that point on, I had a rough time. With that period, it lasted a long time. And it would stop for 2 or 3 days, and then it would start again, and then it would stop, and then it would start again, and it would, and that became the cycle for the next 35 years. And in my 20s, I had a period where I actually bled for an entire year straight, nonstop. They couldn't get it to stop. The doctors couldn't get it to stop. I just had to deal with it. And you don't talk about that with people. Nobody wants to hear about this. Nobody wants to understand. And the worst part of it is that it involved, I know the reasons now, it was polycystic ovarian syndrome. But those, I had cysts inside my uterus that caused it to hurt more than it did for most people. So it was a very painful experience. Around about the time I was about 28, after dealing with this for so long, my mom, suggested, hey, let's go. Why don't you go to Planned Parenthood and, get a pap smear? Mom, I don't need a pap smear. I'm a virgin. I don't need to do that. I know that I'm okay. There's nothing going on down there except for that. And we know that's been going on, for a while. That was my attitude. But she talked me into it. She wanted me to get on the pill because she thought if I got on the pill, it might give me some relief and it might, help me to feel better and regulate it, slow it down, stop it, So we go to Planned Parenthood. We go to Planned Parenthood. And I get this nurse practitioner or PA, something. I don't know what she was. But so we go in there, we sign up, get in line, to go back. I'm there to get a pap smear and get birth control. And so finally, I'm there with my mom. She's sitting with me. And we go back to finally they call me back to the room, and this woman, this nurse woman, she comes back and she says, so when was the last time you had sex? I never had sex. And she was like, and she started to laugh. And I was like, I'm a virgin. And she just kind of giggled to herself, and she went over and she got a robe, the gown, and she kind of laid it down right on the bed next to me, and she's like, put this on and remove all of your undergarments, and I will